Okay, great. Well, let's get started then. I'll just share my screen here. Oops. Let's see. Okay, great. Hopefully you can see my slides there. So yeah, I'm going to be speaking today about undergraduate courses in Chicago-based archival research and moving those courses online and then back again to in-person courses. My name is David Greenstein, and I'm at the Special Collections and University Archives at University of Illinois, Chicago. So just a quick overview of what I want to tell you about. First, I want to give you a little bit of background about this series of courses that we've developed for students to engage with special collections materials. And I want to tell you about an exciting new course that we offered for the first time this year in the spring semester. And then about how we had to adapt that course to be able to be offered online because of the pandemic. And then I'll also suggest, some of the advantages that I've found from student digital engagement with collection materials that are maybe things that they don't get when they use those materials in person, things that we might want to think about keeping going forward in our use of student engagement with collections. So this new class that I want to tell you about today is actually part of a series of courses that we created in special collections to encourage student engagement with our collection materials. And these are full 16-week 4-credit courses that students take. And the idea is to introduce class members to working with archival records, interpreting primary documents, developing their own research questions that can be addressed with the available materials, and explaining the results of their research. In the past, we've done 3 different courses about Chicago and focusing especially on our daily collections. But there's really 2 sets of goals for these courses. One of them is a set of student-facing goals, and that's to encourage student engagement with collection materials. The students who take these courses are honors students. They're offered through the University of Illinois Chicago Honors College. And the students really have diverse interests and disciplinary backgrounds. They're not history majors usually. They come from the sciences. They're, biomedical engineering majors and public health majors, or they're studying pre-med to become medical doctors one day. And they're taking these courses to get general education credit. So the courses are designed to take them from having no experience at all using archives or special collections up to being able to pose their own research questions that they can investigate using available materials. And then hopefully then be able to take that skill forward and use it in their other coursework to engage with collection materials in the future, or to investigate their own interests as well. The courses also have another set of goals, and that's sort of a stakeholder-facing set of goals. The idea is that they were set up to connect stakeholders, donors of materials or their families, other people who have interests in the collections that we have, with the students that are using the collections and engaging with them, so that those stakeholders can see students using the materials that they've given the library, and they can see what we do with collections after they are donated to us. So for example, in the courses we've offered in the past that focus on our daily family collections, we have the papers of Mayor Richard J. Daley, the former mayor of Chicago, as well as Richard M. Daley, his son, and also the former mayor of Chicago. So we had Bill Daley, Richard M. Daley's brother, come and visit the class in the reading room, speak with students, see students using the collection materials from his family, and see like the results of what happens when those kinds of collections are available in the library for students to work with. So this new course, it was called Women in Politics in 20th Century Chicago, and it's really designed to do the same thing, and that's to connect students with stakeholders and connect students with collections. But in this case, the idea is to highlight our really excellent collections documenting women's movements in Chicago in the 20th century, from Hull House at the beginning of the century up to the women's liberation movements in the 1970s and beyond. So again, this was a full 16-week 4-credit course that was designed to be offered for the first time in spring of 2021, and it was originally designed to be an in-person class that would take place inside the reading room in special collections. You can see here just from the syllabus, the idea in these courses is that the students are coming back twice a week over the course of this 16 weeks. So it's different than a one-shot because we really get to engage them deeply in the whole research process. They read secondary sources. Here you can see about women's movements in Chicago, and then they come in and engage with the primary documents related to the different topics of each part of the course. They produce coursework based on their engagement with the documents as well. The other idea behind this new course was to build on research that we'd done recently for exhibits. We did an exhibit highlighting the National Organization for Women Chicago chapter records for the 50th anniversary of the Chicago chapter of NOW. We did an exhibit in 2019 for the 1-year anniversary of Illinois' ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, and that highlighted several of our collections, including the ERA Illinois records. And we'd also planned an exhibit for the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters that had to be canceled because of the pandemic. But the idea was that we had done all this research preparing for exhibits, selected really interesting materials, and then we could build on that research by offering this new course so that students could see those materials and engage with them as well. And just as in the other courses in this new course, the idea was also to connect stakeholders with students who are using their collection materials. So in this case, we invited Marianne Lupa and Wilma Stevens, both former presidents of the Chicago chapter of the National Organization of Women, and they were the original creators of actually some of this materials. They weren't the donors, but they wrote and created a lot of the documents that the students were going to be working with. So we wanted to connect them to that process so that they could see where their materials ended up and how students were engaging with them. And I met Marianne and Wilma when they visited the library to see the exhibits that we did about the National Organization of Women and about the Equal Rights Amendment. And so the course was also going to continue building on that connection with those stakeholders as well. And again, the idea was for students to engage deeply with these new collections too. So what does that look like? To give you an idea, these are the learning outcomes for the course. And these all, except for the first one, they all draw on the SAA, ACRL, RBMS Joint Task Force on Primary Source Literacy standards. But instead of doing a one-shot where you might pick one of these to try to get across to students in an hour, over the course of those 16 weeks, students really get a whole package of those learning outcomes and really get to be more involved in the whole set of the research process there. So the idea is that in addition to learning about the history and politics of women in Chicago, students should be learning about how to search for sources and employ different kinds of search strategies, They're learning to engage critically with the records, to think about things like the context and the audience of the source and potential biases of the creators that they should try to be aware of while they're interpreting documents. They try to learn how to synthesize material from lots of different primary source research together and present it, their own interpretation of that evidence. And then they also try to learn to think about why there might not be primary evidence from certain types of creators or about certain topics, and what they might be able to do to gain access to those kinds of voices and perspectives, even if they're difficult to find in the archives. And so that course was designed to happen in person, but it had to happen online because of the pandemic. And it became, immediately, to me, quite challenging to think about without us all being in the room together and us not being in the room with the materials. And even for a while, I wasn't able to be there with the materials. How are we going to be able to replicate that online? So that's what I'd like to show you now, is like how are we able to create meaningful engagement with these materials when we couldn't all be in the room together and access the physical materials. And you can tell clearly that this is a cartoon, because if it was a real Zoom meeting, there'd be half blank black boxes staring at you. So they should make a clip art that has a bunch of blank black boxes too. So one way we did that was we made online collection engagement a central part of the course. So we thought a lot about how online work with collections materials might be different than in-person materials. So here we did one reading by Renee Santilles, and she wrote this essay, Toiling in the Archives of Cyberspace, where she talks about her own experience using online archives instead of going in person. And she basically argues there that no matter how well they're ultimately made, internet engagements with archival materials is never going to replace physical work with archives, that there's this human response to tangibly touching things that she sees in herself and her students that's really important. And she thinks maybe you'd start off online or something like that, but that really the research experience is always going to involve physically being in an archival space. And students had a lot of interesting reactions to that. They said that one of the main reactions was that maybe it's just that there's technological limitations that haven't been overcome yet. They have like a lot of confidence that if there are problems with online archives, that they'll ultimately be solved by future technology. They also sort of felt like they didn't see it as much of a problem that I did, that they weren't going to get to see the real stuff. And I think maybe that's possibly because they hadn't ever done it before, so they didn't have an experience to compare it with. And this is a stance that I have a lot of sympathy with. Like, you're holding a letter that Martin Luther King had written and he signed it, and now you're holding it. That's really cool. You don't really get that when you're looking at a picture of the letter on the internet. But I'm not sure the students got that distinction because they hadn't ever held, the physical letter. And then we also read an essay by Maria Cotera, and she talks about digital tools really differently. She thinks that this kind of online engagement with archival material really has the power to disrupt the way that scholarship has been produced in the past. What is going to be the correct or appropriate outcome of research in archives or special collections? Does it have to be a scholarly monograph or a peer-reviewed journal article, or might there be other forms of knowledge production that come out of that kind of research that could be available to lots more people to participate in? That online engagement with collection materials really might enable a much wider array of people to be able to not only access and interpret those materials, but really shape the process of knowledge production, because they're able to share the results of those interpretations with other people online as well. So these are questions, about who gets access to interpret archives, but also what the products of archival research should look like. And so we thought about, there is something special, some special sauce to working with the real letter from Martin Luther King, but there's also something special about digital engagement with collections too, and we wanted to try to focus on that as well in the course. So here's the part that I'm really excited to show you, which is, how did we actually get students to engage with the collection materials online? And what I did was I used Scalar, which is an open source sort of digital humanities publishing platform. It's from the Alliance for Networking Visual Culture, I believe at the University of Southern California. And many of you may be familiar with the software already. It's very popular for producing digital exhibits. UIC Library uses it now for our digital exhibits, and the Chicago Collections Consortium also uses Scalar to produce its digital exhibits. So basically what I did was I created a digital exhibit in Scalar that allowed students to access the materials that they would normally see if they were in our reading room. So here you can see a page from this Scalar book, this Scalar exhibit that shows records from the National Organization for Women Chicago chapter, some of which were created by Marianne and Wilma, who I mentioned previously. And then the students were able to read these materials, look through the documents, and then to talk to those former now presidents about the documents as well. But the other component of how we used Scalar was that I made the students co-authors of the digital exhibit. So they were able to have access to also create and write on the documents and share their own interpretations with each other by building portions of this digital exhibit that we used together. So here you can see one of their writing assignments where they were asked to find an available set of materials and then pose a research question that they thought they could answer using that available set of stuff, and then write an essay doing that and sharing the results with the other students in the class. And here at the top is a word cloud that Scalar generated as one of its visualizations that shows the frequency of words in all of the students' assignments combined. You can see women was the most frequently used word for this assignment. So let me stop sharing my screen for just a sec so that I can switch and try to show you this live site, and we can actually take a look at some of the student work. Let's see here. Okay, great. So here's the site that we used, and it's divided up into two parts. In this first part, these are the sources that we scanned and made available to the students, organized week by week, and they could scroll through and find the material about each topic that we were looking at and engage with it there. So for example, if we click on week 2, these are flyers from our University Archives Office of Student Affairs records, and they're each in a folder, one for each of the student organizations full of their flyers. So I scanned the contents of each folder and made them available to the students. If they click on one of the folders, it'll open it up and show us the documents in that folder, and the students can click through it just as if they were browsing through the documents in the reading room. But because I also made them authors on this site, they're able to comment on and annotate the documents too. So here somebody's written, isn't this one of the authors we're reading next week? Or here somebody wrote, I read that the Circle Women's Liberation Union was founded at this birthday party for Susan B. Anthony too, and here's another flyer for a Susan B. Anthony birthday party. So on the other, in addition to just writing on and annotating the documents, the other part of this site is really the part that the students created themselves with their own writing assignments and projects. And I'll just show you for just a minute briefly one or two of these. Here you can see this is a writing assignment that just asks students to choose a document of their choice and write about its significance. And so the great part about this is normally in a class like this, a student would write a paper and I would read all of these and then the students wouldn't get to. But here, even though the students weren't in the reading room together saying, oh, look at this cool document I found, they were able to at least engage much more meaningfully with the end product of each other's interpretations about these documents. And some of the assignments, they look really like a traditional essay might look, but on some of them, the students were really took advantage of the fact that we weren't asking for a paper or essay, and that they could be much more creative. So here you can see one where the student really played with color and space and tried to highlight the main points she wanted to make for the reader here in her assignment in a little bit more of a creative way. And at the end of the course, each student was able to produce their own mini exhibit where they posed their own research question and then shared the results of that research with the rest of the class. So I'd love to just show you one or two of these as well in the minute or so that we have left. So here's an exhibit that a student created about Rachel Yaros, who was a physician that worked at Hull House and opened the first birth control clinic in Chicago. And they've created a timeline here showing records that they found in special collections about Yaros. Here's, if you click on them, then they offer some more interpretations. And this is a picture here of Yaros in the lower left-hand corner. She was the only woman faculty member at UIC's College of Medicine when she worked there. Or here's another exhibit about Lonnie Myers, who was also a reproductive rights activist later in the 20th century. So some really exciting and creative student projects that they were able to produce, having never used this software before, and also having never worked with records in the archive or special collections before. So I see that we're low on time here, so I'm just gonna wrap up real quick and yeah, then we can save a bunch of time for questions too. And I'd love to also hear from folks if you found any advantages, to online engagement with collection materials when you were teaching during the pandemic too. But I just want to make a couple more quick points here. One is that we don't really know, normally we get a lot of long-term engagement from students who have taken these courses. They come back and they do capstone research projects in special collections. They've been panel speakers at like a paper release celebration to show donors, students' engagement with materials, and they've spoken to news outlets about their work with special collections materials and things like that. But we don't really know if this kind of online work is going to produce that long-term student engagement the way that physical work with materials has before. And the same goes for the stakeholders and donors too. Like normally, Bill Daly comes, he's in the reading room, he has like a day of meetings where he meets with other people at the library. And that's not really the same as the sort of zoom in, zoom out kind of meetings that we were able to do this time. But we also did see some advantages to online work, and that included the fact that we had a lot more bandwidth without reliance on physical spaces. So in the past, we were only able to offer so many of these courses because they took place in the reading room, and it displaces researchers who might be using that space. But because the courses are online, we were able to offer them to quite a bit more students in the last couple of years than we ever have before. And like I was suggesting previously, I think another advantage is really, we do feel like there's something special about tangible artifacts, but there is something special about digital engagement with collections too. And that's really the potential to democratize and diversify access, not only to the collections, to being able to read the materials, but also to interpreting them and producing results of those interpretations and even knowledge production itself. There's a potential to change who has access to that process as well with online collections. So I want to save time for questions, so I'll end it there.